We grow up hearing one universal truth repeated so often it feels unquestionable. Family is everything. Your foundation, your safety net, the bond you're never meant to break. Blood is thicker than water, and walking away is framed as betrayal, weakness, or ingratitude. But what happens when that bond becomes the source of chronic pain instead of safety? Across the world, a silent and deeply misunderstood phenomenon is unfolding inside families. Adult children are cutting contact with parents, siblings drifting into permanent silence. From the outside, it looks sudden, rebellious, even cruel, a child abandoning their parents, a family torn apart without warning. But behind that silence is rarely impulsive anger or dramatic resentment. What exists instead is a complex psychology of survival built over many quiet years. Estrangement is not about hatred, punishment, or revenge. It is often a last attempt to preserve mental health when nothing else worked. To understand family estrangement, we must look beyond the break itself. We must look at the slow erosion that came long before the silence. One estrangement is not sudden, it is erosion. Estrangement almost never begins with a dramatic argument or explosive confrontation. It begins quietly through erosion that is slow, subtle, and invisible to everyone else. For years, sometimes decades, the relationship appears normal from the outside. Birthdays are celebrated. Holidays are attended. Smiles appear in family photographs. But beneath the surface, something is wearing down layer by layer. Not one catastrophic event, but hundreds of small moments accumulating over time. Psychologists call this microtrauma, minor wounds that seem harmless in isolation, a criticism disguised as concern, a boundary pushed slightly further every year, a dismissive tone that quietly teaches you your feelings don't matter. Individually, these moments feel too small to name or confront directly. Together, they create a psychological climate your body begins responding to automatically. You tense before the phone rings. Rehearse conversations. Shrink parts of yourself. What looked like family dynamics slowly becomes chronic anxiety woven into daily life. Estrangement doesn't happen because someone stops caring. It happens because they slowly run out of capacity to keep absorbing the same wounds. 2. The volcano effect. From the outside, estrangement often looks sudden and completely out of nowhere. Parents say everything seemed fine. Friends insist nothing looked seriously wrong. This illusion exists because pressure builds silently, hidden beneath everyday normalcy. A volcanic eruption looks sudden only to those who never felt the ground shake. Lava doesn't appear overnight. It forms slowly beneath the surface over years. Family estrangement works the same way. Accumulating pressure without visible warning signs. The final argument is rarely the true cause of separation. It is simply the moment internal strain becomes impossible to contain any longer. Years of ignored boundaries, invalidated emotions, and unresolved pain converge together. To parents, it feels like rejection over one incident to adult children. It represents decades of unacknowledged suffering finally releasing. Estrangement is not a reaction, it is a culmination. The silence appears sudden only because the pain was endured quietly for so long. 3. Assigned roles inside dysfunctional families. Long before distance begins, many people are cast into roles they never chose. In dysfunctional families, identity is assigned rather than discovered naturally. There is the golden child praised and protected as an extension of the parent's ego. Their role is to fulfill the family's narrative of success, often at the cost of authenticity. Then there is the scapegoat, blamed for tension they did not create or control. Often the scapegoat is the most emotionally aware and therefore the biggest threat. There is also the invisible child surviving by disappearing, staying quiet, needing little They grow up self-reliant, yet uncertain if they're allowed to exist fully. And sometimes there is the parentified child carrying emotional responsibilities far too early. They learn love must be earned through service, sacrifice, and silence. None of these roles allow space for a true self to develop safely. When someone steps out of their assigned role, the system resists fiercely. Reclaiming identity feels like betrayal to a family built on fixed emotional functions. Estrangement often begins not by leaving people, but by refusing the role anymore. 4. Emotional neglect and the empty well. Some of the deepest wounds in families come not from actions, but from absence. Emotional neglect leaves no bruises, no scenes, no single moment to point toward. It is defined by comfort never offered, protection never given, curiosity never shown. Growing up without emotional attunement teaches a child their feelings are inconvenient or invisible. As adults, they often appear strong, independent, and unaffected on the surface. Inside, there is a quiet ache that never fully resolves. They return to family again and again, hoping this time will be different. Maybe this time they will listen, ask questions, or meet you emotionally. But each visit ends the same way, with an empty bucket and familiar disappointment. Psychologists call this the empty well, a source you keep returning to despite nothing being there. Eventually, returning becomes a form of self-abandonment rather than hope. Estrangement happens when someone chooses to stop thirsting for a love that never came. 5. Trauma bonding and the hope cycle. Many people stay far longer than they should because trauma bonding quietly keeps them attached. Moments of harm are mixed with rare warmth, apologies, or promises of change. The nervous system learns to confuse inconsistency with love and relief. A cutting remark, followed by affection, creates powerful emotional attachment. Boundaries are crossed, then repaired just enough to keep hope alive. This begins the hope cycle, a pattern that keeps people waiting and forgiving. You believe if you try harder, stay calmer, or give more, things will improve. Hope becomes focused on who they could be, not who they consistently are. Over time, this cycle erodes identity, confidence, and emotional stability. Leaving feels impossible because hope feels like loyalty, and endurance feels like love. Estrangement begins when hope finally breaks under the weight of reality. 6. Why leaving feels like betrayal. Many adult children were taught that leaving family means being selfish or disloyal. They learn that protecting themselves is framed as cruelty rather than self-respect. Wanting peace becomes evidence that something is wrong with them instead, so they stay, endure, shrink, and rationalize behavior that slowly erases their identity. They wait for a breakthrough moment that will finally make everything better. But that moment rarely comes, and the cycle quietly continues year after year. When someone finally leaves, it is not because love disappeared. It is because they realized the pattern was not going to change. Staying meant losing parts of themselves slowly, 1 year at a time. Estrangement often begins with a painful realization: if I stay, I will eventually disappear. 7. Distance as a survival strategy. When people hear no contact, they often imagine punishment, revenge, or emotional coldness. In reality, distance is rarely an act of anger. It is an act of survival. For many, the first step is low contact, limiting conversations and shortening visits. It is a way of saying, I still care, but I can't give full access anymore. Low contact is often an attempt to reshape the relationship without ending it completely. Others use gray rock, becoming neutral, predictable, and emotionally unreactive. Gray rock is not coldness, it is protection against manipulation, guilt, and emotional escalation. After years of ignored boundaries, some choose no contact as a last option, not because they hate their family, but because every other boundary failed. Distance brings grief, guilt, and relief at the same time. For many, it is the first moment their nervous system finally feels safe. 8. Ambiguous loss and silent grief. After distance begins, many discover the hardest pain is not separation itself. It is grieving someone who is still alive yet emotionally unreachable. There is no funeral, no final goodbye, no ritual to bring closure. You are mourning a relationship that never fully existed as you needed. This is called ambiguous loss, grief without clear endings or social recognition. Holidays intensify it, empty seats, amplifying what cannot be explained easily. Others celebrate warmth while you carry a quiet, complicated sadness alone. Relief and guilt coexist as peace arrives alongside questions about loyalty. This grief is invisible, but it reshapes identity and emotional memory deeply. 9. Reclaiming identity after distance. When the noise finally quiets, something unexpected begins to surface inside. A sense of self, buried beneath years of roles, fear, and emotional survival strategies. Reclaiming identity is not sudden, it is slow, tender, and often disorienting. You begin asking questions you were never allowed to ask safely before. What do I want? What feels right? What actually makes me feel safe? Choices stop being filtered through fear of judgment, punishment, or emotional backlash. You stop shrinking, stop apologizing for existing, and start trusting your inner voice. Healing also means refusing to pass the pain forward to another generation. Many choose distance not from resentment, but from clarity. This ends with me. Estrangement is not truly about breaking a family apart. It is about redefining what family actually means. For some, family is the people who raise them for others. It becomes the people who finally made them feel safe. Walking away doesn't mean you're heartless or ungrateful. It means you stopped walking back into the fire out of obligation. You chose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, healing over history. That choice is painful, complicated, and profoundly brave. You are allowed to grieve what you lost. You are allowed to grow beyond it. You are allowed to build a life shaped by safety, boundaries, and chosen love. And if this silence ever felt familiar, you are not alone. You deserve to heal.